The next step is to take the wool that is marked as head, ears and legs. In this case it's the darker brown colour, so we're going to be doing this one here. So it makes sense to make the ears and the head first so that you can just use up whatever wool is remaining to make the legs. If we were to make we cover the legs next, you're not sure how much you're going to need for the head and the ears. So we're kind of doing this in a bit of a backwards order. So we're going to have all these components and then we're going to assemble it all together. So it should be quite exciting once you've made all these bits and pieces. So for this, you'll also need your pot of water and your sponge with your red and your gold needle. You'll need your gold needle too, and you might need some dress pins. Your template. This template here, and it's marked the little circle at the top left hand corner as ear. So we're aiming with the ears to make two little pancakes, two little blobs of brown wool that are roughly ear shaped, roughly ear sized. They'll shrink once they're attached to your sheep, but to begin with we're going to aim at making them this big. So we almost half make them and we don't finish them. We finish them off once they're attached. It's much easier to shape them once you've got the head in place, etc, etc. So preparation for the ears, let's call it the preparation stage. Just tease a little wool away. If you've never worked with wool fibre before, is people hold their fingers too close together like this and they pull too hard. The softer you are with your fingers, like crab claws, softer you are, the easier the fibres will come apart, because the fibre length is about this length, so you pulling in between that length is just pulling like a tug of war on the two ends of the fibre. So just tease. Gently tease. And you can see the amount hopefully here. It's like a bit of fluff. It's like nothing. It's like hair. And I am going to just dip my fingers in my water and just twizzle. Sometimes it's easier to do it on the palm of your hand, whichever, a bit of both. Mix, rub together, and eventually, no more water. You don't want to drench this, you just want damp moisture. You're just wanting the wool to just catch that little bit of moisture. And if you push it between your thumb and your forefinger there, you'll feel it, you can see it as it's working. It now looks like a hairball. It looks like something your cat has coughed up, which is right, that's what it should do. That would be ideal, because that's going to make a great little ear. So after a couple of minutes, hopefully you've been doing this along with me and you'll have reached this point. No more water. If it's too wet, use your flannel, or like I said earlier, use a trouser on your jeans or your skirt or something like that, your cardigan. Just get the moisture off. Oh, you can see it's come together. Now you're wanting to match this little pancake. You don't want it to be a ball, you want it to be flat. So I'm just going to place it on my sponge here. I'm going to take my gold needle. I'm going to use my red needle to just hold it on one side. It looks like I'm about to do heart surgery, doesn't it? And I just want to prod it a lot on the top at first. And as it starts to flatten, turn it over. And you're just going up, down as fast as you can, and you'll see it starting to knit together before your very eyes. If you do it too much on one side, it will start to stick to the sponge. You don't want that. And for the rough edges, you just want to, I'm just going to use my fingers, I find it easier. You just turn in, a little bit fiddly, just turn in the edges. So you're just getting your needle underneath, hopefully you can see that, underneath, and turn it over. And just make them as like little mini beef burgers, little pancakes. There we go, and that's it. That should be enough for one ear. Let's hold it up against the template. Still a little bit big, it's a little bit outside the template, but that's okay, don't worry. It's a guide. When you've never done it before, some people think they need time to make the finished tiny perfect ears before they attach them. I wouldn't. I would just get a base, a starter, something to work with to come and finish when we're a bit further along. So now you need to make two of those. So you might want to pause the video, because in the playback I'm going to speed this up. So pause the video here. Make your second ear, make sure they're both equal. Doesn't matter if they're big or small, but just make them equal to match the template as best you can, and then come and rejoin the video.
Why don't you just let go and quiet down your ego? Don't complain about fine.
And there we go, that's fine for me. I'm happy with these two. They're a little tiny bit bigger than my template, you can see there, but that's fine. They'll shrink once they're attached to my sheep. Okay, place those to one side. We're now going to make the head. And again, you can use your template to help with the head sizing in proportion to the body. And it might even be worth at this point, I mean, you can have a test and see where your body is measuring up to the template. Don't forget you've got an undercoat to go on this. So the undercoat might make it bigger, but then it might shrink down as you felt it. But just check that you're not way off. You don't want your sheep to be as big as the whole piece of paper at this point, which hopefully it shouldn't be because I've provided you the right quantity of materials. Okay, so next for the head, again, it's tricky to give you a quantity, but if you just start with any quantity, and you're just going to have to adjust it up or adjust it down according to how it's measuring up. So same process, tease it apart, mess it up, twizzle it between your thumbs and your forefingers. This wool is great because it's so coarse. It really works well with needle felting. Some of the merino wools out there that you've probably heard about or used yourself in some of the projects. The merino wool is great for wet felting, but not great at all for needle felting. It's too soft, it's too shiny. There's no real crimp to it, and the crimp, I mean the curliness. The animals, the fibres from the animals that have been in colder climates, they tend to work better for needle felting for me because they're the ones that's had to keep themselves warm over the winter and they've had the thicker, curlier coats. Okay, I've got a bit of a mess and I'm gonna just squash it up into a ball, roughly. And as before, either your red or your gold, whichever you find works better for you. I'm using my red. I'm just gonna stab it a little bit, just for a couple of minutes. I'm not gonna, oops, ow. I'm not gonna do this too perfectly, because what the next stage I want you to do is take a little more and just be a little bit reserved with this. Don't forget you've got another 4 legs to make out of this. So I've just taken this amount, which is quite just a fluffy bit, and I'm going to just help it all hang together by placing my, what would you call that, the head base, the blob that I just rolled up. I'm going to place it in the centre and just roll it round and wrap it up like you would wrap up, I don't know, what would you wrap up? A sausage inside a piece of bacon. Sorry, vegans. So once it looks a little bit like this, that's when it's up to you whether you use your sponge or whether you just use your fingers. I prefer to use my fingers and just do it slowly and take my time. And you can see I am holding my needle so that if it does go all the way through, it's going into this space here, it's not going into my fingers. And I'm going to probably just move to my red because it's not happening fast enough for me. And I'm just tack on the surface. And you can see it is like magic, it will just slowly start to come together. And you know what, that feels, you don't need to do this to compact it really dense. It's not necessary. That should be enough to hold it together, and I'm just gonna check on my template. That feels fine to me. It fits inside my head template. I think the smaller heads actually look a little bit cuter on sheep. So, I mean, if it's splaying over the side of the template for the head, I'd say take a little away because you're gonna basically, you might run out for your legs. The legs don't actually take that much wool, but until you've done one of these, I think you don't really understand what the quantities are, do you? So what we're left with here is the leg wool, and I'm going to put this template just to one side for a second. For the legs, if you untangle this bit of wool now and just space it out so that you've got kind of like an even piece of fibre. And you want to, just to make sure you use the same amount of wool on each of the 4 legs, I would just divide it in half any way you want to, whatever's easiest for you. I just tear it kind of down the length, down the middle. So that's 2 equal parts, and then divide it in half again. I'm going to actually just go down the length of the middle, which is normally the easiest way to divide fibres. You kind of, it's like going down the grain of a piece of paper or the grain of a piece of fabric. Make it easy rather than trying to tug of war in the middle. If you've got a bit that's heavier in one than the other, then take a few fibres, put them into the other piles. It doesn't have to be exact. And we're gonna look to cover the legs on the sheep. So take your sheep, and this can be, I'd say, the most fiddly aspect of making your sheep. If you are finding it too fiddly, you can always just leave them as pipe cleaners. I think they look quite cute and a little bit more authentic to a sheep anyway. Especially as a kid, if you're doing this with kids, you know, small kids, they might find this bit too boring, might take you too long. But basically what you're going to be doing is take one piece of wool for one leg. I'm just going to make it into almost, you're creating a piece of yarn. I think it works best to twizzle the wool with a little bit of moisture. It will just start the felting process. It'll make it a little bit more coarse so that it felts and attaches to the body of the sheep, the leg, sorry, much easier. Okay, and that will already feel a bit better. And then you are with each leg. I would start perhaps at the top. You're going to work wrapping around each leg. It's up to you how tight you do it. I would say medium tightness. And you want to go, I've started at the top where it meets the body. I've gone to the bottom. I'm going to go around the bottom and then back up to the top. So if you then take your gold tip needle and start to stab around the top, swap to my red. Found that, and I do this, you might do this, swap between your red and your gold as you go. You just sort of responding to the crunchiness of whether it's actually felting as you're stabbing it, I guess. And I'm holding the leg. This is how I do it. This is not necessarily how you need to do it. I hold my leg between my fingers and I gently just tap, tap, tap. If I hit my skin, it's not hurting, and that's how gentle I am when I needle felt my legs, just for the reason that if I slip, it hurts when you catch yourself. And you can spend as little or as long as you like doing this. You can have fat legs, you can have thin, spindly legs. As long as the wool is attached and in place, that's good enough for now, and you can come back and you can tweak and perfect later on. Hopefully that's enough information and I've shown you enough how to do that. Hit the pause function, go away, do 4 legs and rejoin the tutorial.